In a globalized world, I think we often, when we talk of our external engagement, especially our economic engagement, we tend to really focus on trade. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But we often neglect work and the mobility associated with work. Just to give you a sense of what it is to which we don't pay enough attention. Last year, remittances to India were $135 billion. That's about roughly twice our exports to the United States. Now, it's just the remittances, because think of the people abroad, their own livelihood, the assets they have created there, the services which have been generated in India, the second, third order consequences of all this. And I leave it to you to actually imagine what is the size of this business which is called mobility. And I put it to you, it is clearly multiple X times the remittance. Now, that's the positive side. There's also, like in life, a downside to it. Because when mobility is legal, when mobility is formal, then it has a whole lot of beneficial impacts, which I will talk about. But when it is not, then I think it is actually almost a magnet for every kind of bad business to be associated with it. So if you look at trafficking per se, all the associated crimes, and often it leads people with agendas of various kinds, political agendas, separatist agendas, they all join up to the illegal mobility side of it. So the very fact that you have today recognized the importance of mobility, for me, is a cause of satisfaction. Now, obviously, there are two aspects to this mobility, or three aspects to this mobility. One is demography. I mean, there are places where there's demand, but there aren't enough people. The demography and the demand are mismatched. The second, to some degree, is competitiveness and talent, that other people offer something which makes it worth, the while of the hosting society to get them. And the third is actually social attitudes towards work, which is, in many cases, there may be people, but they don't want to do that particular kind of work, or they don't want to do it at that cost, in that number, under those conditions. So the fact is, today, mobility is an increasingly important factor of the international economy. Now, we know there is a market for mobility. But I think from the viewpoint of the government, there are three consequences which emerge from that. One, how can we be enablers of mobility? How can we improve the skill sets of people who are potentially mobile? How can we provide them with the facilities to make them mobile? The second, arrangements, formal arrangements, sometimes between governments and companies, enterprises. And the third, to the people who are mobile, who go out of the country. How do you equip them with the confidence and the assurance to operate in a global workplace? So, in a sense, it begins from creating a global workforce, preparing a global workforce at home, and then ensuring when the workforce is actually deployed in the workplace, that it is done so as efficiently and as securely as possible. So I actually want to share with you today some of the things which have happened in the last 10 years, because particularly to the Indians in the room, many of you would take it for granted, or many of you, may not even be aware of it. But these are actually very deep changes which have been of great impact when it comes to mobility. 10 years ago, if you wanted a passport, there were, I think, 77 places in India to which you could apply. Today, in the last 10 years, we have added 468 more such places. So pretty much any citizen of India is actually today able to apply for a passport by journeying at best a few hours, as compared to what it was 10 years ago, when actually you had to make a trip to, if not a metropolis, at least to a good-sized town, and probably spend a few days in order to just get a passport. So this expansion of actually a passport, because passport is where your mobility begins, international mobility begins. Moving on from that, getting a passport used to be a very hard challenge in this country. I mean, I tell people, when many of us, I see Vikas Sarup sitting here, when many of us actually joined the Foreign Service, people in your locality said, aha, we now know someone who will help us get a passport. Okay. Today, I mean, nobody even talks about it. In fact, if somebody doesn't get a passport within a week or 10 days, I get some pretty angry social media comments. So the speed at which we do passports, the clarity of documentation, we've actually streamlined it. And when we speak today about digital governance, in fact, in many ways, it is our passport program which is the poster child of digital governance. Now, it isn't just in India. We also used to have a situation where if you lost your passport, it was very difficult to get it replaced or renewed abroad. And if you lived in one country, you couldn't get it done in another country. Now, that's gone. Just like in India, you can today apply for a passport anywhere, because we know people are also internally mobile. So you don't have to go to your home state or your district or your hometown to actually renew your passport or apply for your passport. You can do it from anywhere. The fifth one is actually when people are abroad, they will have problems. There has to be a channel to address those problems. And, it cannot be episodic. It cannot be, I know somebody, so I complain and they look at me. There's got to be a system to it. And again, one of the big changes is a portal we started about a little more than 10 years ago called Madad, which means help. It's an acronym. And just to give you a sense of how much that portal is being used, I was clearing Parliament questions for the week. Tomorrow and day after are my Parliament days. In the last 3 years, only in the Gulf, we actually have addressed 138,000 grievances using the Madad portal. So that gives you the kind of scale of both the demand and the ability today to respond. Now, another, I would say, mechanism which we actually have expanded its usage is something called the Indian Community Welfare Fund. We collect a cess on passport and consular services, and that is used to address the needs of people who are in distress. And again, I'm just giving you a figure because I was looking at it early this morning for my Parliament questions. In the last 3 years, 238,000 people have benefited from the use of this Community Welfare Fund. These are people for whom we may have bought tickets back home, who had legal cases abroad. In some cases, they may have passed away, so their last rites were done. There'll be a variety of stuff. So the point I'm making is that when we speak about mobility, it isn't a question of giving a speech and telling people, it's a great idea and, we have comparative advantages and we should be going out. unless you back it up with a whole lot of practical steps on the ground, unless you actually, as I say, prepare a workforce, equip a workforce, secure a workforce outside, you are actually not doing justice to the issue of mobility. And sometimes it can be exhortative as well. You know, we often today make it almost an SOP to visit labor camps. I mean, I think even when the Prime Minister goes abroad, particularly to the Gulf countries, you would often see him making it a point to actually visit a camp where people are working on site. Often it's a construction site or a big service site. And you know, when that starts from the very top, I think the rest of the system certainly gets the message. And this combination, you know, the combination of doing things physically, of using you know, digital platforms. I spoke about grievances, even for consular services. You know, when you live abroad, you need attestations of various kinds. You need people to certify documents of various kinds. Today we have a program called e-Seva, where most people upload it online, they get their reply online. So the embrace of digital mediums, the creation of a physical infrastructure, the improvement of services, the motivation that is given, all of this today is actually preparing a global workforce. Now, having said that, things do go wrong, you know, and one of them, unfortunately, are conflicts. So, for a country today, which has really millions of people working abroad, we cannot afford to be impassive or agnostic when there is a conflict. So, it has become, in a way, you know, for us, I won't even say it's a duty or obligation. We take it as a standard procedure that if there is a conflict, the moment we see that coming, our systems get ready to go to secure our people. And again, you know, in the last 3 years, and I'm talking after Ukraine, you know, Ukraine, roughly we brought back 20,000 people. In the last 3 years, we've actually brought back 28,000 people from different conflict zones. So this kind of gives you the kind of scale of the responsibility which happens, you know, when you have a mobile global economy and a mobile workforce which is operating in that economy. Now, having said that, let me deal with other aspects of it, the diplomatic aspects of it. Clearly today, intergovernmental agreements dealing with mobility are a very important part of our diplomacy. We have 21 such agreements, in addition to which we have mobility provisions in some of the free trade agreements that we have done. And we certainly, in many relationships, see that as actually adding a new dimension to the relationship. I see the ambassador of Japan sitting in front of me. When Prime Minister Modi this year went for the annual summit, the understanding that we have for a greater flow of talent from India to Japan in various professions was very much a centerpiece of that visit. Moving on from that, you know, all this would happen, as I said, if we actually prepare a workforce, we better prepare a workforce. So the emphasis that we have on skilling in India, you know, which is of course dealt with by a different ministry, but we are really part of a whole. I mean, we are the, you can say, the external face of the mobility. But the back office of the mobility is actually the educational and the skilling system. And today the attention which is being given to improving skilling and actually customizing it where possible to the needs of a potential user is something which is important. Now, recognizing all of this, of course, we are also in the process of rewriting our legislation which underpins mobility. We have the current legislation is more than 40 years old, and it envisaged mobility. Actually, the very name was, it was an Immigration Act, whereas today we see it much more as a mobility because we see it as a two-way process. The people who go out often do come back, sometimes for shorter duration, sometimes for longer ones. So we have an overseas mobility bill today which we have put out there for public comments. It is something when we are ready we propose to bring in as a legislation. Now, so far I have spoken about the mobility of people, but I also want to highlight that work can also be mobile. That, you know, if the talent doesn't go out, the out comes to the talent. And we have actually seen this growth of what are called global capability centers in the last few years. I understand today that there are in this country about 1,700 global capability centers, which are about half, they constitute about half the global capability centers in the world. And these are centers where global business has found it more effective, more efficient, really to send the business out and to utilize the talent in a different geography. And obviously, given the availability of the talent and the efficiency of it in India, we are a strong attractor of that. Again, there are estimates that about 2 million people are currently employed in global capability centers. And I think the rough revenue estimates which people put for global capability centers is somewhere between $65 to $75 billion currently a year. And looking ahead, I mean, certainly as we are moving to an era of AI, of higher skills, of advanced manufacturing, and also of, as I said, of social services of various kinds, we do anticipate a world which will put a greater premium on mobility. And we see ourselves, you know, we are 1/6 of the world's population. But I think if you look in terms of the younger working age population, we would be somewhere between 1/6 and 1/4, would be closer to 1/4 actually of the global workforce of a certain demography. So our relevance to the global talent skill market is actually only going to grow with all of this. And having said all of that, I also recognize that, you know, mobility has its own politics. It has its politics in the receiving society, in the hosting society as well. Managing that is also part of the diplomatic challenge, something that we are gearing up to do. So these were some of the thoughts I thought I would share with you today, taking advantage of the theme and the occasion. Once again, thank you for inviting me to speak at the opening, and I look forward to the conversation with Professor Rajamohan.
To one where the transition, now you mentioned the kind of effort that the government puts in, how much of demand you get from the states, for example, from the chief ministers, to do this work a lot more vigorously then?
You know, that's also been an evolution. Again, if I were to sum up the changes of the last decade in two parts, one is to create the kind of SOPs, the practices for this to happen, because it's not that easy. You know, I mean, if the Ministry of External Affairs were to ask the Air Force or the Ministry of Defense to send out planes, to send out ships, or to ask airline carriers to dedicate planes, unless they are habituated, unless it has been worked out in advance, it doesn't happen. I mean, unless you have a culture, even within our own system, let us say of, you know, I don't want in a crisis someone saying, where is the authorization to house, 1,000 people who have landed up at my doorstep. So we've actually had to undergo, in many ways, a change in our own attitudes and thinking, that if there is a crisis, if there is a problem, I mean, solve it. I mean, you know, you have the resources, you have the flexibility, you are empowered to do it. The systems are ready. I mean, we've all practiced it a lot. I mean, every time we do an operation, can be big ones. And when I look back, I mean, the first one for me, when I came back as Foreign Secretary 2015 was Yemen, But now I've even forgotten, in the last 12 years, how many of these we've done. I mean, we've done Afghanistan, we did Israel, we did Iran, we did Sudan. I'm not talking of first responder disaster. I'm talking of bringing back Indians from conflict situations. And what has happened is we have kind of honed a system where we even have a unit in the ministry. I mean, the moment you kind of flick a switch, they know, okay, get moving on this. So that's one I would say, important part of it. The other part of it is, this we do get, I mean, it's understandable that chief ministers, state governments write to us. But we also try to make them understand that, look, once you leave the shores of India, for us, you are Indians, so I can understand the pressures and compulsions on a chief minister. So we hear it, we absorb it, but at the end of the day, it just feeds into a national metrics of a plan which we deploy outside.
Minister, what you said about the current policy of migration is very impressive, but there are 3-4 contradictions built into the policy. One, you yourself referred to legal versus illegal. Now, how are you addressing that question in this migration and mobility agreements? 21 you have signed. What has been the experience implementing that this, while you promote legal migration, you also work with the foreign governments to prevent illegal immigration?
Well, I think we can be one part of the change, but our partner government has to be the other part of the change. And one of the reasons why we do these agreements is we try to make them understand, look, unless we cooperate, it's in our interest that mobility is legal. It is therefore a corollary of that. It's in our interest to be against illegal, irregular mobility. But that also requires cooperation. So if you can't say I'll do one part and not do the other part. Just like we wouldn't say do the legal and by the way we won't do anything for you on the illegal. But they also cannot expect we'll do everything on the illegal and by the way stay out of the legal. So this is a compact, it is a working arrangement that we have. I mean, the legal and the illegal are two sides of the same coin. We have to cooperate on both. Yeah. And again, cooperation has many facets here. Often, because one big challenge is always that we have an obligation if there is any of our citizens who's abroad illegally. We have an obligation to take them back. I don't think that's standard international practice. But we have to verify that they are indeed ours. So there are a lot of issues here, sometimes documentation. Now, there are countries which cite privacy, but they can't have it both ways. They can't say it's privacy, we can't tell you, but by the way, he's yours, take him back. So we need a degree of transparency and understanding here. And that's really what we try to do, which is really, work out understandings with different countries. And my experience with these 21 odd agreements and, has been that wherever actually we have a formal understanding, over a period of time, it has actually been very effective. Yeah. It would not be wise of me to give specifics here, but I know there were governments and often my own counterparts personally who began this exercise very skeptically, but then they saw for themselves that how much better the system works when we do have such a collaboration.
Minister, second contradiction is really for 60 years or so, I mean, much of the Western world was very open for immigration, starting with our doctors, then our professors. Now you have actually the IT professionals going all across the Western world, especially the English-speaking world. But that open...
Not necessarily the English-speaking world.
But
You know, there are some non-English speaking which have actually shown very strong
recently Germany,
growth in recent
I'm talking
times.
about historically. But across the world, both English-speaking and non-English speaking world, there is a political and social backlash against too much immigration. So that tension between, the economic needs require some foreign talent, but at the same time, political and social pressures to limit or restrict that immigration. We're seeing that in the H-1B debate in the US. I mean, how are you dealing with this tension that is unfolding?
Well, I think a lot of these are issues, Raj, which they have to resolve. Because in many cases, the actual crisis has nothing to do with the mobility of the incoming workforce. I mean, if there are concerns, let us say, in the United States or even in Europe, it is because they very consciously and deliberately over the last 2 decades allowed their businesses to relocate. That was their choice. It was their strategy. So if there is pressure on jobs in many of the developed countries, the pressure on jobs is less because people came in those sectors. It is more because they allowed manufacturing to go out, and you know where. Yeah. So I think they have to find ways of fixing it, and many of them are, because if you see, it isn't only about concerns about immigration or mobility. It is also about loss of jobs and about recreating manufacturing and pulling back, what was allowed to leave over many decades. So I can't give you a simple answer to it, but the part which concerns us is to convince them that mobility, the use of talent across boundaries, is to our mutual benefit, that they would be net losers if they actually erect too many roadblocks to the flow of talent. And particularly if you move into an era of advanced manufacturing, if, you will need more talent, not less talent. Yeah. And talent cannot be organically developed at a high rate. There is a certain structural impediment out there. So, and in their own societies, you can see the tension. Often the people in the forefront of entrepreneurship and technology would actually make the case for mobility. It is the people who I would say have a certain political base or a constituency to address who may oppose it, and they will probably reach some modus vivendi. There.
So some kind of a new balance between the economic and political should be worked out.
Yes, but also some kind of new balance between the mobility of people and the mobility of work. If it becomes harder for people to travel, the work's not going to stop, okay? So if people don't travel, the work will travel.
So either insourcing or outsourcing, no, there is a third contradiction, while exporting talent.
Last two, by the way, didn't end up as contradictions.
You're trying to resolve them. Yeah. But third one is really, is one thing to export talent, but your domestic needs for the same talent are also growing as you try to do more manufacturing, more advanced technologies, more medical doctors. In every field where migration we've seen grow, there are also domestic needs, and I already see the government talking about returnees or facilitating some talent coming back. So where do you see this tension playing itself out?
I don't want this to seem political, but this is actually a statement of fact. As a sort of a sweeping proposition, the number of educational institutions in this country in the last 10 years have doubled over what they were in the 60-odd years they were before that. What actually happened was after the first spurt, we somewhere plateaued. You and I are of the same generation. Probably when we left school, there were 5 IITs in the country. Till when we hit the middle age, our middle age, there were still 5 IITs in the country. You know, the manner in which, I'm just using IIT as a shorthand, I mean, don't take it literally. But the manner in which, let us say, our engineering schools, our technical schools, our medical schools, our nursing institutions, I mean, take whichever field. We didn't see, you know, if you had a certain growth rate, if you know, it made common sense your capacities should have paralleled the growth of your economy. It didn't happen. So it's actually been, in the last 10 years, there's been this huge emphasis on increasing capacity. And why I say that to you is, you are not going to solve this problem, this apparent contradiction you refer to. You can't tell people, don't go out to work.
It's a freedom of movement.
You know, we're a democratic society. They have a freedom to travel. If they get better prospects, of course they will look at it. The common sense thing is to create opportunities at home. To create opportunities at home, you need to address both the demand side and the supply side. The supply side means you've got to, you know, keep increasing your output of skilled and talented people. And the demand side would be, unless you are able to post, you know, sustained high growth rates, you're not going to be able to, you know, find opportunities for their employment and retention.
One way of actually resolving this dilemma is also, as I said, strengthening the talent base in the country. That also, we've seen some foreign universities come in here. I mean, I think for many countries, it makes sense, rather than drawing students in, to set up universities in India. But is there enough reform from the government side to actually facilitate foreign universities operate here and create skills?
You know, again, it's interesting. I was at a school of management over the weekend. And because I was there, I looked into the history of that institution and saw the foreign collaboration with which it started. This was, by the way, the Indian Institute of Management in Calcutta.
The first one in the country.
Yeah, the first one in the country. You know, the initial phase when institutions were created in this country actually had a lot of foreign collaboration. Most of your original IITs, for example, had partners. Many of the agriculture universities had partners. The management institutions had partners. Then this plateau phase, where actually there was relatively little creation.
Also the protectionist phase?
Yeah, it was also the protectionist phase. I don't think the two, it was not a coincidence. So what we have now done is we've actually liberalized, because again, as I said, like talent can move out or work can come in. We have today close to 1 million foreign students, 1 million Indian students studying abroad, 1 million. You know, why is that? Does it not make sense actually to liberalize the educational environment so that the universities come in? You know, it's cheaper, it's effective, we stand to benefit. You know, there's a very powerful logic, and it's happening now. I mean, we've had actually, I think it began with a few Australian universities. I know a number of British universities have come in, including one fairly close in the National Capital Territory, the National Capital Region. And I see many more happening. You know, I mean, I was in Canada a few weeks ago, and I can tell you Canadian universities which draw in a lot of students. Many of them are actually quite interested in setting up campuses in India. And I think we are, you know, we see benefit in this. And we've left it very open. You know, they can come in on their own, they can come in collaboratively, they can do double degrees, they can do brownfield. I mean, it's up to them to figure out.
So one last contradiction, or a seeming contradiction or a tension, if you will, that while you talked about demographics in your presentation, and there is actually a steep decline of in the Western societies, in Far East, in China, in Japan, Korea, everywhere. But there's also an Indian decline that is we're beginning to see, certainly in the South Indian states. But the fact is, at what point do we need to think through? I mean, how do you promoting netlist policies, which many countries are doing, Is that something too far away at this point, or we have enough talent base today to deal with the potential decline in India's own demographic?
You know, I think it's a matter of degree, but it's important. It's natural with prosperity that there is a tapering. But what we are seeing internationally is actually in many societies a very, very sharp fall, which the word decline would be more appropriate. So often, you know, when people try in our business to forecast the world and say, okay, what's really going to change in 10 years? You are saying what will change in 5 years, other than your magazine would be selling in more places. So people, you know, common answer would be, well, technology, AI. I think if you, you know, demographic trends are a significantly underrated, understudied aspect of the change that awaits us, because they could actually have very, you know, sweeping implications for the future of many societies, and each one of them has some peculiar, you know, reason for why where the fall is very, very sharp. Where it tapers, I think the situation is much more amenable to you know, adaptation, and it will, you know, this will happen. I mean, it's a natural trend. I don't think you can mitigate it, but it's not something you can actually reverse.